Hello, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. This webinar is brought to you by AI World School, and this will be recorded today. Just want to share that with you for future use within our organization. AI World School is an online self-learning platform providing AI and coding courses for students ages 7 and up. And today I'd like to start by introducing you to our key speakers for the day. First of all, we have Dr. Lynette Dickerson. She is a passionate veteran elementary school teacher, and she's just 5 years ago made the switch into ed tech, where she currently writes curriculum, creates professional development for educators, and presents at events on a national level. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education, a master's degree in curriculum and administration, and a PhD in biology. She's most recently returned to the classroom to get a degree in computer programming. I'd also like to introduce you to Dr. Donna Noel. She is an esteemed, highly sought after speaker and educational consultant who works with schools, school districts, teachers, and individuals to help them improve their instructional programs. She speaks and consults worldwide on topics in STEM integration, literacy development, mathematics, science, and social studies. She has a rich, broad background in education. She is a former classroom teacher and administrator, has served as a program developer, a curriculum developer, and instructional specialist, and she's taught at the university level. She holds a PhD in educational administration. So upon introducing you to our speakers today, our topic is meeting the instructional needs of every student. Welcome again to our webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Donna Noel to talk with us for a few minutes. Donna?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here today and have a chance to share ideas, concerns, strategies, and solutions. And as I thought about the topic of meeting the instructional needs of every student, I immediately thought of the extraordinarily wide range of diverse students in our classroom. And that is not only a challenge, but it is an opportunity for us to make a difference in our students' lives. The first difference that I would incorporate would be the socioeconomic differences. There's a vast difference between the other differences that is key and tied to the economic development as well as the cultural and language differences is the amount of vocabulary development that young children have before they start school. There was a very important study done, the Hart-Risley study, that was done to determine the number of word utterances a 4-year-old would hear before they start school. And there was a dramatic difference between the higher economic levels and the less affluent backgrounds. And the big difference was in the more complex and specialty words that a child might be introduced to. A difference between maybe the word tree versus taking a child on a nature hike at the age of 4 and not expecting them to grasp the term, but to be able to say that is a coniferous tree and the word cone comes from that. And you might see a pine cone, or that in the fall, deciduous trees lose their leaves. And you don't expect a 4-year-old to grasp and completely master that word, but the idea that they have been introduced to it and hear it makes a difference. So that's just one example. The other diverse backgrounds would include special needs students, our gifted and talented students that we certainly can't neglect either, differences in learning styles, and we have to remember that we have some students that are disengaged or that have completely turned off because they've struggled for so long and they're tired of failing. And so we have the opportunity to try to reach those students with engaging potential learning opportunities that we can provide successful experiences for. And finally, but certainly not something that we want to forget about, is the vast difference in student interest that we have in our classrooms. Students who are interested in robotics, students who are interested in nature, animals, maybe they've had gardening or experiences planting with, with things that they could have in their background. But certainly the differences that are so, so key. And whatever those diverse interests and ability levels are, we have to make our instruction accessible and equitable for each of our students. And so I think we have to remember that very much so. The other thing that we have to do is to identify the strengths and instructional needs of our students. And I have to say immediately that that has been a much more difficult task with this year of the worldwide pandemic, because the vast majority of our teaching experiences have minimized the opportunity to determine instructional strengths with text-driven tasks. And that's because if you're going to do virtual instruction, there are not as many opportunities for us to connect in a dialogue with that many different children who are in different locations and each one having a chance to speak to us. There are not as many opportunities to observe hands-on tasks, and there are not as many ways to observe and identify the process skills. There just simply hasn't been as much interactive learning. But what I'm suggesting, where students can experience success, and we want to build skills, but we want to build self-esteem. And I think the best way to start is to identify some things that we know children are good at. And I use the term children, but whether we're talking about early childhood or all the way up through high school, where we identify things that a student is good at and use what they're good at to help them develop and build upon things that they need to learn and develop those skills. My goal then, if I could summarize, is to develop competence that's on skills and knowledge and application, what it is and how we make differentiation work. I also think that differentiation is a very misunderstood concept. I think there are too many people that think we have to have an absolutely individualized instruction for each child. And that's not really what differentiation means. Instead, it means that we adapt instruction to reach students based on their individual differences and abilities that we've identified. And that's not necessarily harder, but levels of complexity that differ in our instruction. Not harder, but more complex. And it's a continual adjustment, offering meaningful, engaging tasks for each student. We scaffold those tasks. We might scaffold the way we approach a child or a student of all different ages. It might mean that we scaffold what our expectation is of that student. And so when we target the learning level that we've identified, we might have to reteach, but it doesn't mean doing the same thing with the same words. It means trying a different approach. So not again with the same or unfortunately louder, but rather that we want to differ our approach using a new way of helping students understand the concept and the skills that we're trying to accomplish in their learning levels. So we might reteach, we might reinforce, but we also might extend what we're doing because that is what is so very much important as we've built self-esteem and develop their abilities, that we extend, and we have to remember how important that is, that gifted and talented students have to advance in the same level as we work with our struggling students. And our struggling students have to advance more than a given amount of learning per year, or they'll never catch up. And then I said to myself, okay, let's think how we can do that. There's only so many ways that you and I, as a teacher, can approach a child personally interacting. But technology is our friend here because there's such a wide variety of tools and courseware available. I've mentioned English language learners, and we have courseware that has multiple languages. We have audio that helps students hear in their native language and to reinforce, or in some cases where there's a bouncing dot that helps students follow along as they're learning. And the visual. And I think we have to remember how much more effective we can be in differentiation if we utilize what we know about visuals. Visuals are the same in all languages. And we know, if we look at the research, how effective using visuals can be for our students. There was a study back in 1990, so many years ago, that the 3M company, the people that make Scotch tape, did. And they found that we process, as humans, we process visual information 60,000 times faster than we do text-driven learning. And yet, what have we continued to do? We have continued throughout learning in schools to focus on text-driven instruction. One quick other addition, we have great opportunities to differentiate if we employ project-based learning and independent inquiry. And this is a golden opportunity to also add coding and artificial intelligence as we expand students' understanding. So we're using multiple approaches on content, process, and product, and it's more qualitative than quantitative when we're differentiating. But we're having multiple options for how we take in information, how we make sense of it, and how we express what we've learned. So we are differentiating for each of our students as we work with them. And you'll see now on your screens that we have to also balance that text-driven learning with hands-on experience. Research has told us over and over and over again that hands-on learning is the most effective way to learn. We know this for students, we know this in our own lives. But we have, again, the prevailing learning has been book-driven and text-driven, and even in the virtual world with text-driven courseware, where students were asked to read, to remember, and recite. Well, learning is way more than reading, remembering, and reciting. Hands-on learning is active, engaged learning. It's learning by doing. It's helping the student solve a problem, to create something unique and individual, to find out, and to test an idea or a hypothesis. And the research tells us that when we do hands-on learning, the learning retention is 75% or greater, as opposed to the 10 or 20% when students simply listen. Hands-on learning increases engagement, focus, mental stimulation, motivation, empowerment, confidence, and using critical thinking skills. It helps students' minds grow and learn based on doing things. And we only have to look a little bit, and it ties in with engagement. You learn to be a good driver by driving, not by learning to read a book about how to drive. You learn to be a good cook by actively engaging in the process of preparing food. You become a good pianist or a good athlete by practicing. So that proverb of tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, but involve me and I understand. And so that really is crucial. So let's think for a moment again about those key elements of learning, the key elements of engagement and motivation. We keep it fresh by varying how we approach the learning process, what we entertain our students with the actual process itself, with their active participation, and where they connect with the content and the process cognitively and emotionally, where the teacher, you and I, demonstrates our interest, our excitement about the content, and our positive attitude about what we're doing. We create a growth mindset for our students where we are enabling our students to believe in their own ability to learn. And that is so key. And where we are creating by engaging students with content and skills that tie to their interests, whether that be Irish dancing, horseback riding, coding and robotics, or some other very, very important interest in their lives. And we help them connect, again, cognitively and emotionally, to create a love of learning. And that growth mindset and love of learning are probably the two most important things that we can do for our students, far more important than any specific content. And what we do is we provide attainable challenges, and that ties with interest. But I want to also mention productive struggle. Students need to be stretched just beyond what they have already proven they can do. Unless we stretch and challenge them just beyond, then there is no learning. If we only ask them to do things they've already proven they're doing, they're practicing, which is important, but they don't stretch to advance. We need to remember to give students time to think. That allows their engagement to involve their creative and logic that are being used to add activities such as robotics and coding, where it's very, very stimulating, engaging, and self-fulfilling when a student learns how to code and to maybe create their own robot or to be able to input coding into a robot that is already designed, where they can actually make it do something and watch the successful action that they have offered. They could also do some gardening where they actually maybe test different moisture content or warmth or different light. And then finally, let's look at how we can connect learning experiences across the curriculum. Good teaching does not teach reading in isolation. It doesn't teach math in isolation, science, or anything else. We teach students to learn to read so that they can read to learn in science and social studies, that wonderful content reading, and where we show them how to apply the math skills. Why STEM has become so, so important in our world of learning, where we tie science and technology and engineering concepts and math together, not as isolated where we say, oh, we have teachers that will say, oh, yeah, I teach that and that. What we do is we teach it in an integrated, woven fashion, the way life itself is. And what I like to think here is that when we coordinate our instruction across the curriculum, we're maximizing our instructional time, and we're optimizing student learning, and we're making it more efficient so that we have more time to do those wonderful hands-on experiences that I've already talked about, where we might actually allow them to have more time for coding and learning about artificial intelligence. Because some teachers are going to say, oh, how do we have time for the extras? Well, if you've maximized your instructional time and optimized student learning, it does provide you the extra time that we need. And I think in summary, we want to remember that everything we do as teachers, how we teach affects learning. It affects student attitudes. And if I am showing and demonstrating my passion for learning, it is as contagious as anything else in the world. And it becomes a way of igniting a passion for learning. And what we're hoping to do is help students to develop knowledge and understanding and skills that will help them be successful in learning for life. And so we want to capture their hearts as investigators, problem solvers, innovators. I want to have aha moments, awe and wonder. And I want to provide resources in a diverse learning environment where students will engage and learning thrives. Lisa, I want to turn it back to you for a minute.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate your time and sharing with us today. I want to transition to our next speaker, but before I do that, let me just tell everyone in the audience that at the very end of our presentation, we will be providing a little bit of product information from AI World School, as well as offering a discount on products. While we are in our presentation, please keep in mind you're welcome to put questions, type questions into the chat area, and we will answer your questions at the end of the webinar. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lynette Dickerson for the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. So I will continue to build on some of the things that were being said prior. And so some of the challenges that are faced within the classrooms seem to be universal. So how are we challenging our higher students? How can we differentiate to all of our students and even our special education students? And how are we making sure that everyone is getting what they need? Not just when we're in the classroom, but virtually as well. Dedicated teachers want to make sure all of their students are learning, and they ask questions such as, how can I meet these needs with all of my students, just as we're saying within this webinar? And if you find yourself struggling with that question, that's a good sign to start with. It means that you're already considering each child's individual needs, and that's amazing. Good for you. Give yourself a pat on the back. But as we know, teachers by definition are busy. And sometimes the thought of differentiating lessons in general can be extremely overwhelming. So let's begin to talk about how it can be less overwhelming and what we need to do so it doesn't have to be a daunting task that's hanging over our heads. It can definitely be manageable. And sometimes, might I say, it can even be easy. Differentiation simply means adapting your teaching to the different needs of each of your individual students. Yes, you can still do this whole group. You can also do small group, and you can do individual activities. Each is just as important as the other. If you want to meet the needs of all your students, you do have to do all three. So we'll take a quick look at each one before the end of today's webinar. So one question I hear often is, can you do whole group activities to meet the needs of students? And the answer is yes. Please don't make the mistake of thinking that your entire day should just be done in small group rotation. It doesn't need to be, and it can also be extremely overwhelming. Nor do you want the entire day to be in the opposite of whole group. It's finding that balance. So what should whole group instruction benefits look like? Well, it ensures that every student receives direct instruction on the basic core standards. Whole group maximizes the instruction of the direct teacher instruction that each child receives. So you're getting your core benefits out with the maximum amount of time. It also allows the entire class to build the common foundation by participating in the same experiences, discussions, and lessons. And then whole group lessons are usually the most effective way to introduce a new content. If a lesson is something that everyone in your class should get, generally whole group is the way to go. And it's the way to share that activity. And it's the best way to form a group for that purpose. So when you start to form your DI groups, your differentiated groups, some ways that you can do this, you can do it in a variety of ways. As you see on the screen, these are some ways that when I was in the classroom, I would do them personally. However, I've talked to other teachers that have some other methods as well. And it's also important to remember that when you form a group, these groups don't have to last forever. Some groups might last the day, the week, the month, the unit, or just a quarter. It just depends on the individual level of your students, the needs of your classroom, or what you have going on. And as we know, sometimes you have the year of, as we used to say, the revolving door. Sometimes your classroom seems like the kids are always coming and going and the kids are always moving. So you have to monitor and adjust that as well. Even ability or skill-based groups can change as your students progress or as your units change. Sometimes a student might be extremely high in one unit, but lower in another skill. And that's okay. That's the beauty of flexible grouping. Frequent formative assessments should drive your grouping decisions, and it will ensure your students are getting the correct instruction. The assessments don't have to be challenging nor time-consuming. Sometimes you can use exit tickets, pre- and post-test data to make it a pathway to see what's going on. With Chromebooks, you can use some things you can use even quick data just coming from pull data on your Google Classroom just to see what's going on. You can pull data from benchmark tests or other educational software. Independent work is important too. It also lets students build mastery of their skills. Skills that aren't fully mastered until they do the work independently. Because as we know, some students are masters at building off of each other and just kind of scooting by. So mastery and fluency can take practice and repetition, and some need more than others, some do need less. And independent work allows these students to practice as much as they need to. It also allows them to move on when they're ready. Students should be able to complete work successfully. So continue to work and form your groups as needed. So I'd also like for you to think about how you can scaffold these independent work assignments, not just within your groups, but within your classroom as well. All of your work should have an independent focus that focuses directly on the child and what they can do independently, but not necessarily fluently. Pre-test students and assign work on an independent level based on their data. And their data, you can also base it on their interests as well. So if they have an interest on something specific, like AI, robotics, something of that nature, build an independent work assignment around that. The more they're interested in it, more likely the better they're going to do. And then use your observations from the small group instruction to make adjustments and drive your scaffolded assignments. And then later on, use that to continue with your flexible grouping. And it will just continue to drive that instruction and your differentiation even more within your classroom, but also make it easier on yourself down the line.
Thank you, Lynette. I know you also wanted to share just a little bit about your experience with AI World School and your son taking the classes here. So if you will take a moment and share a little bit about that experience, then I will take over and talk a little bit more about our products.
So recently, I have an 8-year-old son, and recently we went through the AI courses together. He was able to go through some independently, but then as they progressively got harder in the Primus and the Novice courses, we did work together. What I found enjoyable was that he was able to work independently, work at his own pace, but then we were able to continue together as a team effort, and he was able to feel accomplished and challenged, and then share his knowledge with other family members and friends as he worked through the courses. And then with some of the challenge programs and projects, he was able to work with them with friends as well. I also liked that as he was working, he didn't have to devote a designated amount of time each day to the assignments, as it would save his work and he could pick up and continue as he was ready. So if he only had 15 minutes to work at a certain time, or he had 45 minutes at another session, each was willing and ready to go. And so it was very enjoyable and fun, and the language was easy to understand and the content was applicable for his age.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And thank you both to our speakers for today in sharing educational content with our audience. I'm Lisa Dean and I work for AI World School. AI World School is an online learning platform. It is self-paced and it provides transformational AI and coding education to students, whether they're at home or in school. We believe that with the knowledge of how AI works and its impact, children have the potential to create innovative solutions to real-world problems, transforming our societies and shaping the future of our planet. Artificial intelligence, what is it? Well, it's a broad field to study in computer science, having the ability to perform intelligent tasks such as perception, comprehension, machine learning, natural human machine interaction. Artificial intelligence, or AI, refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think like humans and mimic their actions. The term may also be applied to any machine that exhibits traits associated with the human mind, such as learning and problem solving. Coding is the new literacy. Children who learn to code from a young age are more prepared for the future as they are working with and understanding the real technology around them. Artificial intelligence is used so much in our everyday lives that we need to make sure that our children understand its impact on careers in the future. Let me introduce you to Novus, Primus, and Meritus. They represent the way we at AI World School break down the courses by age. Our flagship courses are quite exciting. They are $99 for 24 sessions, and we are offering them for a limited time at a 30% discount, which I will share with you more details on at the end of our presentation. AI Novus focuses on students who are ages 7 to 10. AI Primus focuses on those who are age 11 to 13. And then AI Meritus is for those students who are age 14 and up. Each of these packages have 24 sessions and generally will take 24 hours to complete. We also have micro courses to introduce you to. And the micro courses here pictured are just 5 sessions. Now, some of our micro courses are longer than 5 sessions, but they start at just 5 sessions and take you through different subjects for specific age groups. You'll find that the course content is suitable for that age group for students who are ready for rigorous and challenging curriculum. You'll see that in this specific section, these are for ages 11 to 13. And there are 5 sessions in 2 of the options and 10 sessions in another option. These are micro courses, and they are just $30 to $40 for these sessions. What you're seeing here is our added courses, especially for those ages 14 and up. For a very rigorous curriculum experience, they can explore JavaScript and Python. And within these sessions, they're much longer. They're 30 sessions or 60 sessions. We at AI World School feel that we offer well-researched courses focusing on the big 5 ideas of AI. We have a comprehensive curriculum that is aligned to CSTA standards. There are over 200 hands-on, real-time AI coding experiences within the platform, which help develop computational and critical thinking skills. All of it is designed and curated by engineers and educators that are trained and certified by ISTE, Intel, IBM, and professors from Oxford. Our team at AI World School is experienced in teaching students robotics and STEM, having over 100 years of collective experience. We invite you to visit our website at aiworldschool.com to learn a little bit more and to try a course today with a 30% discount. You will just use the code EDU2021, and that's valid until April the 5th. I want to open the floor to a few questions right now at this time for our guest speakers. And I have a few questions here in the chat if you'll give me just a moment to reach over and grab these questions. First question I have is, this is going to be a question for Dr. Lynette Dickerson. I teach 5th grade, and I have academically advanced students who are 10 or 11 years old. Which course should I select to keep them all on the same track?
Absolutely. There's actually a couple that I could recommend. So if with them being academically advanced, depending on if they've had any exposure to the Scratch programs or not, I would first begin with the AI Primus, and it's going to walk them all through at a self-paced program of going through what they need to know based on the AI and the coding. Then from there, they can move up to the Scratch exploration, followed by building their own Android app. I feel that would be very beneficial for them, and they can learn. And then once they're there, there's some challenges within each of those courses that they could work together on collaboratively. And then, as we mentioned before, you can work to scaffold that learning, or even use it as with some differentiation and use those ideas as well. I see that being a lot of fun in that classroom, and I think I would even like to come and take a part in that as well.
Thank you, Lynette. I have another question here it's also directed to you. Since your child has taken the courses, what did he find the most engaging?
Wow, so I'm not going to be able to narrow that down to just one thing, since we found a couple of things that were very engaging. It was the step-by-step that it walked through, and if something was a little bit difficult to understand in the beginning, we could go back and try it again. But then after the content was understood, even though it was so rigorous, we were able to work through later into some challenge projects. So I liked that it wasn't just on the screen, but we could extend it later as well. So there are lots of parts to enjoy.
Thank you. This question I'm going to direct over to Dr. Donna Noel. This is a good question for you. With all that I have to teach, can I feel comfortable adding something like artificial intelligence? I'm not tech savvy anyway, so how will I help my students with these courses? Dr. Noel?
That's a very realistic question, and one that many people in our audience probably ask themselves as curriculum continues to grow and expand and the stress levels rise in our hearts and minds. But again, when I mentioned a little while ago the idea of connecting instruction across the curriculum, we free up some extra time because we've maximized our instruction, giving real life learning for our students, where you learn to read in the reality of the world, where you read signs and you read maps and you answer questions because you're curious and you find out. And you've really optimized student learning, giving such an added benefit of extra time for the hands-on learning, very much like what we've been describing in coding and robotics. And giving students the opportunity to do those kinds of things, because children today are very, very curious and engaged in the idea of how a robot works. And that even ties a little bit more to the question of artificial intelligence and helping students understand what that can mean and giving real life examples for it. So it's really a wonderful way to teach in the way that learning is applied in our everyday lives, and then having that extra opportunity to give them practice.
Thank you. I have another question here in the chat. I'm going to direct this also to you, Dr. Noel. This is a good one. I know you've had a lot of experience in this area. This person says, I keep hearing people talk about artificial intelligence, but I still don't really understand what it is. Can you explain it in more simple terms?
I think many people are asking that question because they keep thinking, oh, artificial intelligence is the future, but artificial intelligence is very much the now and the present. I would try to explain that as learning to input information in a digital format to make a technology tool or a device react the way a human mind would, which is why we call it artificial intelligence. And then I would try to give some examples. It would be rare in today's world if somebody doesn't have a cell phone, but when we ask Siri how to get somewhere, the voice recognition that Siri hears in our phone anticipates the words, and it's been constructed by inputting data and information in a digital format to recognize our voice and our question. And sometimes she doesn't answer the way we wanted it to. And so we get a little frustrated and say, no, sorry, that's not what I meant. But so we ask it again, and it's had lots of digitized information coded into a tool to simulate the way the human mind would. The same kind of thing, and a lot of children have experienced today with Alexa. Alexa, play the Star Spangled Banner of Thailand, or please play the Star Spangled Banner of another country that we might have been learning about in social studies. And information has been digitally inputted to respond to our question, and then the information is there digitally to respond and perform the way the human mind would. So it's giving examples, but certainly knowing that it's inputting digitally information to make a technology tool respond as the human mind. I hope that would help.
Thank you for answering that question. I'm just looking here in the chat and I don't see any more questions right now at this point. I do want to close the webinar at this time by saying Thank you so much to all of our attendees for your attention today. And thank you to our key guest speakers, Dr. Donna Noel and Dr. Lynette Dickerson. Let me just remind you all that our coupon code for a discount is available at a 30% discount until April the 5th using the code EDU2021. Thank you so much for your time today and have a great day.